Chapter 1. The Birthday That Felt Like a Rejection. I stood in the back of the room, staring at the golden balloons hanging in the foyer, spelling out, "Happy Birthday, Savannah." It felt like a cruel joke. It was my birthday too, after all. But the words above me couldn't have been more mismatched for the occasion. Savannah was everything I could never be, the shining star of our family, effortlessly perfect, the one everyone celebrated. Meanwhile, I stood there in the corner, invisible. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the music blasting from the speakers, all of it was for Savannah, not me. No one even noticed me. My mother, who usually had so much to say to me, barely glanced my way, her eyes fixed on Savannah as she spoke of her latest triumphs. "Isn't she just incredible? So proud of you, Savannah," she said, her voice full of adoration. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent, swallowing the bitterness. Every year, it was the same thing. I spent my life in the shadow of my sister's success, always second place, never enough. And no matter how hard I tried, I was always invisible. And so, in that moment, as Savannah smiled and laughed, I realized that it was time to stop pretending. I was done. I walked out of the party, through the front door of the house and into the cool night air. The city of Brooklyn awaited me, its lights sparkling in the distance like a beacon of freedom. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't have to keep chasing something I could never have. It wasn't just about escaping my family. It was about finding my own voice, taking control of my life. I would prove to myself, not to them, that I was enough. By morning, I packed my bings and left without a word. I wasn't just leaving a party. I was leaving the life I had been living, the life I never asked for. It was time to take my future into my own hands. I stood in the corner of the living room, quietly watching the spectacle unfold. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the music blasting from the speakers. All of it was for Savannah, not me. No one even noticed me. My mother, who usually had so much to say to me, barely glanced my way, her eyes fixed on Savannah as she spoke of her latest triumphs. "Isn't she just incredible? So proud of you, Savannah," she said, her voice full of adoration. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent, swallowing the bitterness. Every year, it was the same thing. I spent my life in the shadow of my sister's success, always second place, never enough. And no matter how hard I tried, I was always invisible. I looked at my father, his face expressionless as he nodded approvingly at Savannah's latest business idea. He always did that, always looked at her with those admiring eyes. I wondered when I had stopped mattering to them. When had I become invisible in this house? Feeling the suffocating weight of the evening, I turned to leave the room, hoping for just a moment of quiet. Maybe it was time to step outside, breathe for a minute. But as I passed my mother, she barely looked up from her conversation with one of the guests. "Eliza, sweetheart, could you get us another bottle of champagne? And maybe check on the appetizers in the kitchen? Thanks, darling," she called over her shoulder, her voice soft but dismissive. That was it. That was the moment I cracked. I walked into the kitchen, grabbing the nearest bottle of champagne, but instead of heading back into the living room, I stopped. I stood in the kitchen for a few seconds, staring out the window at the lights of the city. A strange, hollow feeling started to creep in. I was alone, in my own house. It wasn't just the party. It wasn't just tonight. It had been like this for years. Savannah's shining, perfect life had always overshadowed mine. I had done everything I could to earn their love and respect, to get them to look at me the way they looked at her. But no matter what I did, I was always invisible. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door and slipped out into the cool night air. The city was alive, buzzing with energy, yet I felt more disconnected than ever. The streets were crowded, people hurrying along, caught up in their own lives, but none of them knew me. None of them cared. I walked for what felt like hours, past the bright lights and towering buildings, until I found myself standing outside a little cafe in Brooklyn, a place I had passed by dozens of times but never stopped at. It was cozy, with warm lights spilling out from the windows. The decision came to me in that moment. I didn't have to stay here. I didn't have to keep trying to fit into a family that had long since forgotten how to see me. I could leave. I could go somewhere where no one knew me, where I wasn't overshadowed by a sister who had everything. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, feeling the warmth of the cafe envelop me. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in years, I felt a little bit of freedom. I sat down at a small table by the window, ordered a coffee, and took a deep breath. This was it. I was leaving. Not just this party, but this life. The life where I was always second to Savannah. The life where I was never enough. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but the thought of starting fresh, of carving out a space where I could be seen for who I truly was, filled me with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope.
The next morning, I packed my things. It was time to go. Brooklyn would be my new home. I wasn't sure how I was going to make it, but I knew I had to. I had to prove that I could stand on my own, that I could live a life that wasn't defined by being in Savannah's shadow. It wasn't just about running away from my family. It was about finding myself, proving to myself that I could be more than just a background character in their perfect little world. I walked out of that apartment, out of the life I had known, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a rush of freedom. It wasn't about leaving behind my family. It was about leaving behind the life that no longer fit me. It was time to find something new, something that was truly mine. I didn't look back.
Chapter 2. Starting over from scratch. The air in Brooklyn felt different, more alive. It wasn't the manicured streets of Manhattan, but it felt real, raw, like the city had a heartbeat that you could almost feel pulsing under your feet. I found a small apartment on Claremont Avenue, tucked away on the top floor of an old brownstone building. The rent was affordable, at least for now, and it was far from the prying eyes of my family. I needed this. Space, freedom, the chance to breathe without the weight of everyone's expectations on my shoulders. My first few weeks were a blur. I spent every waking moment working at a small design studio in the neighborhood. It was nothing glamorous, just a modest place with white walls and large windows that let in the kind of natural light that made everything feel like it was full of potential. The studio was tucked between a cafe and an old bookshop, and I was lucky to land the job. But nothing about it came easy. The owner, Gina, was kind but distant, running the business mostly on her own. She didn't have the time or resources to hold my hand through the process. I had to prove myself, and no one was going to do that for me. I was used to being invisible, but this was different. Here, I wasn't just competing with Savannah, I was competing with everyone. No one knew me, and no one cared. I spent long hours at the studio, my hands aching from sketching out designs for clients I hoped would pay attention to me. I didn't have the luxury of a backup plan. The studio was small, and the work was inconsistent. Some weeks, I had more work than I could handle, but most of the time I was left waiting for emails that never came. The money was tight. I'd stretch every dollar, trying to make it through the month. But there was something about being on my own that kept me going. It was the same feeling I had that night when I walked out of the house in Manhattan. I was free, even if it meant struggling. Every inch of progress felt like a small victory. One afternoon, while working on a logo design for a local restaurant, I overheard a voice beside me. "Hey, Eliza, how's it going with that restaurant logo? Need a second opinion?" I looked up to see Noah, one of the other designers at the studio. He was tall, with messy dark hair, wearing a casual shirt and jeans that'd seen better days. He had a kind face, not overly charming, but genuine. He wasn't the type to try to impress anyone, and that was something I appreciated. I said, "It's fine, I guess. Just trying to get it right." Noah nodded and leaned over my desk, looking at the screen. "You've got the colors right, but the font's a bit too formal for a place like that. You want something that feels more local, more inviting." I blinked, surprised at how easily he understood what I was going for. "Yeah, you're right. Thanks." He smiled. "No problem. You've got talent. I can see it." I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't used to compliments, especially from strangers. But there was something about his casual confidence that felt like a challenge. I wanted to prove him right. I didn't need his validation, but hearing that I had something worth offering felt like a spark. Noah started stopping by my desk more often after that. At first, it was small things, suggestions on design, little tips on how to make my work stand out. But over time, his visits became more frequent. It wasn't just about work anymore. We'd start talking about everything from art to our favorite coffee spots in Brooklyn. I found myself looking forward to his visits, even if I didn't want to admit it. One evening, after a long day at the studio, Noah caught me as I was about to leave. "Hey, Eliza, you know, I've been thinking about something. You've got the talent. I've seen your work. You should be showing it off, not just doing designs for clients. Have you ever thought about doing your own exhibition?" I stopped in my tracks, not sure if I heard him right. Exhibition? Like a gallery showing my work? "Yeah," he said, his voice casual, but there was a fire behind his words. "You've got something. You should let people see it. You've got a unique style. It'd be a shame to hide it." I felt my pulse quicken. The idea terrified me. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for people to actually look at my work and judge it. But his words echoed in my head. Was I really going to spend the rest of my life hiding behind clients' requests? Could I actually pull this off? "I don't know," I said, glancing down to the floor. "It's a big step. I don't know if I'm ready for something like that." "You'll never know unless you try," Noah said, his voice soft but firm. "You've got the skills. It's just about putting yourself out there. I'm telling you, Eliza, people would come. You've got something special." I wasn't sure what I felt in that moment. Fear, excitement, maybe both. But Noah's belief in me lit a fire I couldn't ignore. The next few days passed in a blur of second guessing and self doubt. I spent hours sitting at my desk, staring at the blank wall in front of me, imagining what it would be like to put my work out there for the world to see. Could I really do this? Was I ready for the risk? I spoke with Noah a few more times, each conversation pushing me closer to a decision. It wasn't about proving something to my family anymore. It was about proving to myself that I had what it took to stand on my own, that I had something worth sharing. By the end of the month, I had made up my mind. I would organize an exhibition. It was going to be a risk, but it was a risk I had to take. I called a gallery in Brooklyn that I had walked by many times, but never had the courage to enter. I set a date for the exhibition, and I began to plan designs, invitations, everything. I wasn't going to do this half-heartedly. I was going to put my everything into it. As I sat at my desk late one night, working on the final touches for the exhibition, Noah stopped by, as he often did. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me with that easy smile. "How's it going?" I think, I think it's gonna happen," I said, my voice shaky with excitement. He grinned. "I knew you could do it." I paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on the right path. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Noah," I said quietly. He shrugged. "You'd have done it on your own eventually, but I'm glad I could be a part of it." It wasn't just about the exhibition anymore. It was about having someone believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now I was ready to take the step that would define my future.
Chapter 3: The Exhibition and the Recognition. Ready to take the step that would define my future. The thought echoed in my mind as I stood in front of the gallery, looking at the empty space that would soon hold my work for the world to see. It felt surreal. This was really happening. My very first solo exhibition. It was terrifying, exciting, and everything in between. I had worked for months to make this day a reality. The invitations had gone out, the designs were prepared, and the gallery was ready to showcase my work. But even as I stood there, the nerves settled in. I wasn't sure if I was doing this for them or for me. But one thing was clear. This was my chance to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own, without anyone's approval. The opening night arrived quickly. The gallery was buzzing with energy, the air thick with the sounds of excited chatter. People dressed in sleek, professional attire wandered around, sipping wine, admiring the pieces on the walls. There was something almost intoxicating about it. The way the lights illuminated my work, the way people stopped and took the time to look, to see what I had created. For the first time, I wasn't just a bystander in someone else's world. I was the one who had crafted this reality. Noah showed up early, as always. He'd been there every step of the way, offering advice, helping me set up, and occasionally reminding me that I had something to offer. His presence was comforting, but also a reminder that I couldn't let him carry me through this. This was my show, and I needed to own it. "You look incredible," Noah said, grinning as he walked up to me. I managed to smile. "Thanks. I'm still trying to figure out if I can believe it's actually happening." "You should," he replied, his tone warm. "You've worked hard for this. It's your time." I nodded, even though my stomach was a mess of knots. But his words kept me grounded. He was right. I had worked for this, and now it was time to stand tall and let people see the real me, the person I had worked so hard to become. As the night went on, I couldn't help but notice the quiet admiration in the eyes of some industry professionals. I was getting nods of approval, and even a few potential clients were interested in discussing collaborations. This was the moment, the validation I had craved for so long. It wasn't from my family, but it was from people who genuinely appreciated my craft. The recognition was so sweet, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I hadn't told anyone in my family about the exhibition. I knew they wouldn't come. They never had. Not when it really mattered. And tonight, as I saw all the people who valued my work, it became more apparent that I had been living my life trying to gain their approval for too long. Then, as the evening progressed, I overheard a conversation near the back of the gallery. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but it was hard not to catch the words. "Did you hear? Some of these designs, they're eerily similar to what a few other designers have done. I'm not sure if she has the originality they're looking for," a woman said to her friend. I froze, my heart dropping into my stomach. I couldn't make out the rest of the conversation, but the damage had already been done. The seed had been planted.
Later that night, I saw Savannah. She hadn't even told me she was coming, but there she was, standing in the doorway, her sharp eyes scanning the room, wearing the same smug expression she always had, the one that said, "I'm the best and no one can compete with me." She caught my eye across the room, and for a moment I thought I saw something flicker. Guilt, maybe. But the moment passed as quickly as it had come. She flashed me a smile, but it was anything but warm. "Well, well, look at you," she said, walking towards me. "I heard you finally decided to put your work on display. What a surprise." Her tone was laced with sarcasm, but I wasn't going to let her derail me. "It's been a lot of work, but yeah, I'm just getting started." I forced a smile. Her smile didn't waver, but I noticed how her eyes darted to the crowd, as if searching for something or someone. "I see you're getting attention," Savannah continued, "but you should be careful. People might start thinking you're copying others. It's easy to get caught up in the hustle, especially when you have to prove yourself. You wouldn't want to be labeled a fraud, would you?" The words were sharp, deliberate. My blood ran cold for a moment, but I quickly steadied myself. I wasn't going to let her play this game anymore. "I'm not worried about labels, Savannah. My work speaks for itself." I locked eyes with her. She tilted her head, a small, almost imperceptible smirk tugging at her lips. "Well, you're right about one thing. You definitely have a knack for getting people's attention." She paused for a moment, and the tension in the air thickened. "But I wonder, when the novelty wears off, how long will you last?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her words were poison, but I was determined not to let them sink in. Not this time. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The whispers and rumors about me copying ideas kept surfacing in my mind. It wasn't just Savannah. She wasn't acting alone. Her words had been too calculated, too pointed. She was trying to sabotage me, to cast doubt on everything I had worked for. The next few days were a blur. I received an email from a potential client, a large company that was interested in collaborating with me on a branding project. It felt like the validation I had been waiting for. But just as quickly as that opportunity appeared, another email came, this one from one of my business partners. The subject line read, "Concern regarding the similarity of designs." My stomach churned. I opened the email and read through the message. The client had heard from someone that I had plagiarized elements from other designers. My heart raced as I recognized the pattern. Savannah had done this before. She was manipulating my business partners, spreading false information about me to destroy my reputation. I slammed the laptop shut, frustration boiling over. But this wasn't the end. This was just another obstacle, another way for her to try to crush me. I walked away from my desk and stood in front of the window, staring out at the city. No, I wasn't going to let her take this away from me. This was my moment, and I was going to fight for it, no matter what. The next day, I called a meeting with my partners. I was going to prove Savannah wrong. I would not let her control my future.
Chapter 4: The Legal Battle and Family Feud. I would not let her control my future. The decision to stand up to Savannah, to stop letting my family's manipulation shape my life, felt like the only choice I had left. The next morning, I reached out to Jake Harris. His office was a few blocks away from the studio, a small but reputable firm tucked between two coffee shops. Jake was more than a lawyer. He had become a friend over the last few months, and I trusted him more than anyone else. When I walked into his office, I saw Jake already sitting at his desk, glasses perched on his nose, scribbling something down. He looked up and smiled as I walked in, though I could see the concern in his eyes. "Eliza, what's going on?" he asked, his voice serious but calm. "You look like you've got a storm brewing." I didn't sit. I paced around his office instead, too restless to settle down. "They're suing me," I said, the words falling out in a rush. "My family. They're claiming I stole family assets and forged inheritance documents.
They want to take everything, my business, my property, everything. Jake raised an eyebrow, leaning forward in his chair. Are they serious? Absolutely, I replied, my hands clenching into fists. And the worst part is, they've got connections, Jake. They can throw enough money at this to drown me. I don't know how to fight them, but I have to. Jake stood up, walked over to his bookshelf, and pulled out a file. We can fight them. We just need the right evidence. He paused, his eyes meeting mine. I need you to trust me. We'll dig into this, find the holes in their case. If they forge documents, we'll catch them. I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in days. Jake's confidence gave me the strength I didn't know I had. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, late nights, and endless paperwork. I was no longer just fighting to make a name for myself. I was fighting for everything I had built, for my future. But the emotional toll was enormous. My family was using everything they had to discredit me. Savannah made her first move soon after the lawsuit was filed. I received a call one afternoon from one of my business partners. Eliza, we've got a problem, he said, his voice low. There are rumors circulating about your inheritance. Savannah's talking to our clients. They're worried you're not the legitimate heir, that you don't have the legal right to any of this. I felt the blood drain from my face. The walls of the studio seemed to close in on me as I gripped the phone tighter. What is she saying? I asked, my voice shaky. She's saying you've been hiding documents. She's trying to convince everyone you've been taking what's rightfully hers. I slammed the phone down, the anger building in my chest. Savannah was 2 steps ahead. She was trying to sabotage me in ways I hadn't even anticipated. That evening, Jake and I sat down to go through everything. He had already started looking into the inheritance documents, searching for discrepancies. He said he found something. He flipped through the papers on his desk. Look at this. He pointed to a document in the file, a will that appeared to be signed by my late father, but there was something off about it. The date was wrong, and the signature didn't match the one on the other official documents we had. This is a forgery, Jake said, his tone sharp. They're trying to take everything from you by making it look like your father never intended you to inherit. This is a game they're playing, and we're going to expose them. The realization hit me like a freight train. My own family, my father, the man I thought I could trust, had been part of the plan to cut me out. They had used forged documents to steal my inheritance. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a calculated effort to erase me from the family's legacy. The days that followed were filled with endless calls, emails, and meetings. Jake worked tirelessly, digging deeper into the financial records, tracking down anyone who might have information about the forged documents. He found witnesses who confirmed that Savannah had been the one to manipulate the paperwork, using the family's connections to secure her position as the primary heir. You're not going to let them get away with this, Eliza, Jake said one night as we sat in his office, reviewing the evidence. We've got what we need. We'll take this to court and expose them for what they've done. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. The idea of going up against my own family in front of a judge was terrifying, but I couldn't back down. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance. I was fighting for my future, for everything I had worked for. I had to take a stand. The trial began a few weeks later, and it felt like the world was watching. Savannah was there, of course, with her perfect hair and cold, calculating smile. Her lawyer was sharp, aggressive, and well-funded. But Jake and I had the truth on our side, and that made all the difference. Savannah took the stand first, her voice smooth as she spoke about the family's intentions and her rightful place as the heir. But I could see through it. Her story was full of holes. It was a performance, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. When it was my turn to testify, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The room seemed to grow smaller as I stepped forward. The questions started slowly, methodically, but I stayed focused. I talked about my father, about his plans for me, about the work I had done to build my career. And then I spoke about the forged documents. The courtroom fell silent as I showed the evidence, piece by piece. The signatures didn't match. The dates were wrong. And as I finished laying out the facts, I saw the shock in my family's faces. For the first time, they realized they weren't going to win. The jury deliberated for what felt like hours. When they returned, the verdict was clear. I won. I was entitled to my inheritance. I had full control of the family assets, and Savannah's fraudulent actions had been exposed for all to see. As I stood there, hearing the judge's words, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't just a victory in the courtroom. It was a victory for everything I had fought for. For the first time, I wasn't just the second choice. I wasn't the backup. I was in control of my own destiny. After the trial, Savannah approached me, her face a mask of anger and disbelief. "You really did it, didn't you?" she spat, her voice cold. "You won't be able to keep this forever." I looked at her, a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction in my eyes. "I don't need your approval, Savannah. Not anymore." And for the first time, I felt the weight of the world lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over, but I had won this fight. I had taken control, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me.
Chapter 5. The Liberation and New Beginning. I had taken control, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long was gone, lifted by the realization that I was finally free. Free from the expectations of my family, free from the constant feeling of being overshadowed by Savannah, and most importantly, free from the need for their approval. As the weeks went by, I began to feel a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. My days were no longer spent waiting for calls from family members or worrying about their opinions. I wasn't living my life for anyone else anymore. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. And as the peace settled in, something else began to bloom. The work I had poured my heart into was starting to flourish. The exhibitions, the projects, the collaborations, it all came together in a way that felt organic, like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was assembling. One afternoon, as I was putting together a proposal for a new design project, my phone buzzed with a message from Noah. We had been working together on several projects over the past few months, and I had come to rely on his insight, his support, and his unwavering belief in my abilities. His friendship had become something more, something real. Noah's message. "Hey, I was thinking about something. I know you're working hard, but have you considered expanding? You're capable of so much more than just designing logos. What if you started your own studio? Or even better, became your own brand? You've got the talent. It's time to make a name for yourself." I stared at the message, my thoughts racing. The idea of taking that next step had always been intimidating, but Noah was right. I had done the hard work, I had proven myself to the world, and now it was time to think bigger. It wasn't enough to just survive in this industry anymore. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to create something that wasn't just about me. It was about the future I was building for myself and the community I wanted to be a part of. I felt the fire inside me ignite. Noah was right. It was time. A week later, I took the first step toward what felt like a new chapter in my life. I had set up a meeting with the business consultant, someone who specialized in helping artists and designers turn their creative passions into full-fledged businesses. By the end of the meeting, I had a solid plan in place to launch my own design studio. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. As I continued to grow my business, I also began to feel a shift within myself. The anxiety and self-doubt I had battled for years started to fade. I wasn't doing this for anyone else anymore. I was doing it for me, and that was enough. I had built a life that was mine, and I was finally living it on my terms. Throughout this journey, Noah had been by my side.
He wasn't just a business partner or a colleague anymore. He had become someone I trusted, someone who had seen me at my lowest and still believed in me. Our relationship grew stronger every day. I didn't just see him as a friend now. He was my rock, the one person who understood my struggles and my triumphs. One evening, as we were wrapping up a project for a high-profile client, Noah turned to me, his face serious for the first time in a long while. "Eliza, you know I've been thinking about this for a while," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "You've come so far, and I'm proud of everything you've done. But don't forget, this is just the beginning. The world is waiting for what you have to offer. You're not just building a business, you're changing the way people think about design. You're becoming an inspiration." His words hit me like a wave, sweeping away all the doubts I had ever had. I wasn't just a designer anymore. I was a force, and the world had no idea what was coming. The next few months were a whirlwind. The studio was thriving. Clients were coming to me for branding, websites, and design projects. I was finally being recognized not just as someone in the industry, but as a leader in the industry. It felt surreal, but it felt right. Every success, no matter how small, built the foundation of the future I was creating for myself and the community I wanted to be a part of. But even as everything was falling into place, I couldn't ignore the ripple effects of my past. Savannah had reached out to me a few times since the trial, but I ignored her calls. That was until one afternoon when I received a letter from her. It was odd. She'd never written me a letter before. I opened it with hesitation. It was an apology. "Dear Eliza," it began, "I know I've hurt you. I've been selfish, and I've let my jealousy cloud my judgment. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I regret the things I did. You deserve so much more than what I gave you. I'm sorry." Reading those words, I felt nothing. It wasn't that I didn't care, it's that I'd moved on. Savannah's apology, though well-written, felt like it was more about easing her conscience than making amends. The person who had tormented me for so long wasn't the same person I was anymore. I had found a new family in my friends, in my clients, and in my work. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. The letter, though sincere in its own way, didn't change anything. I had already found my place in the world, and it didn't depend on her or on anyone from my past. With the business growing and my relationship with Noah strengthening, I started to dream bigger. This was no longer just about surviving. This was about building a legacy, about creating something that would last far beyond me. I wanted to be a name in design, not just in Brooklyn, not just in New York, but everywhere. Noah and I began discussing new ventures, new projects, new ideas. We were thinking about taking the studio to the next level, expanding into new markets, and perhaps even mentoring other young designers. I had found my purpose, and it was no longer just about what I could accomplish alone. It was about what we could accomplish together. I looked out the window of my studio at the skyline of Brooklyn stretching out in front of me. This was where I belonged now. This was my life, my future, and nothing, not even my family, could take that away from me.